So before I kickstart it, I would like to ground everyone in an NME tradition, which is reading a poem just to ground us, settle us into the space, and energize us for this fruitful, beautiful conversation. And there's a lot of wisdom in the room, which I'm personally really excited to hear. So it's a poem by a No More Exclusions youth group member, Kadeem, who is a important member in NME exclusion, but all members are important. Yeah, so I'd like to bring you guys into our tradition. So bear with me, I'll read a poem, which goes, no more exclusions means no more occupation, no more dispossessing, no more colonizing, no more bombing, no more apartheid, no more false equivalence, no more imperialism. No more exclusion means no more injustices, no more unheard voices, no more unfulfilled dreams, no more trauma, no more accountability, no more broken relationships. No more exclusion means no more expulsions. So yeah, when we talk about no more exclusions, we're not just talking about exclusions within schools, we're talking about all forms of exclusions and cultural practices. So hopefully, whilst we talk, we embrace that energy. We want to thank everyone for coming. We are honored to have such amazing organizers in the space where we can exchange knowledge and strategize as a collective. No More Exclusion is hosting this event, but as we know, we are a massive coalition in the UK, internationally. We're in the spirit of an international organizing, which is important. My name is Sahra. I'll be co-facilitating today with Emmanuel. We have a tradition in No More Exclusion to co-facilitate because we're not an individual activist or organizer. We're organizing as a collective, as a movement. We are part of No More Exclusions, which is a Black-led, community-based abolitionist grassroots coalition movement. Our organizing centers the voices and experience of children and young people who have experienced oppressive education and exclusions. Our mission is to dismantle cultural and punitive practices and cultivate a transformative educational structure and a transformative liberated world. So that's a bit about No More Exclusions. And we thought it was really important today for everyone to come together to talk about what does a liberated Palestine mean? What does it mean to talk about Palestine unapologetically? And also, how do we know what our rights are? And coming together to learn and build our wisdom. But as we speak, over 31,000 Palestinians in Gaza have been murdered by Israel, a sexual colonial apartheid state, since October. It's important before we begin that we honor our martyrs whose lives have been taken from a bloodthirsty regime. Every martyr has a name, has a story, and it's our duty to speak against the injustice that has been inflicted upon them, the living and the dead. Our organizing is for the martyrs, the political prisoners, the resistance, and for a liberated Palestine and a liberated world. We know that the oppression of the Palestinian people inflicted by Israel, an apartheid regime, and other imperialist nations did not start on October 7th, and we must unapologetically rebuke that notion. What we are doing today is coming together to remind ourselves that it is our duty and responsibility to fight for our collective liberation. We cannot be free if Palestinian freedom is being taken away from them. In order to do so, we must continue to increase our political consciousness, and that is our anchor towards resistance and freedom. But we know that we are living under Babylon, and this country, like many other imperialist nations, have used repressive tactics to silence us. We have witnessed this in our schools, in the media, in our marches, on social media, the increase of violent police tactics, because we are, again, living in a police state. Yet we know the power of the people is stronger, and the people are uprising in Yemen, in Burkina Faso, in Congo, in Lebanon, in the UK, internationally. The people are uprising. And as we host this event, we want to ask you all, how are you going to organize? How are you going to resist? And how are you going to be a part of the global struggle toward the liberation and a free Palestine? So as you're hearing all of the wisdom and the knowledge, I want us to all ask ourselves, what is our duty and what is our responsibility in the struggle towards liberation? So this is not just the organizers speaking at you, it is for you to take away and organize as we're just hosting it. And there's a lot of organizing that needs to happen. As Kwame Nkrumah once said, we are not outnumbered, we're just out-organized, and it's our duty to keep organizing. So yeah, that is just a quick introduction. I'll pass it on to Emmanuel, who'll go over the structure of the event and all of their beautiful knowledge and wisdom.
Hello, everyone. Hope everyone can hear me. My name is Emmanuel, and I am an organizer with No More Exclusions also. So today, in this event, we're going to be discussing in community ways and practices that we can use to organize collectively in our schools. We know that there's been a raised consciousness in regards to what's going on in Palestine, in regards to the genocide in Palestine committed by the Zionist state Israel, particularly through social media such as TikTok, Twitter, Facebook, and this has caused younger people, particularly racialized people, black and brown people, to begin speaking out in schools. And as we've seen, especially through like the surveys that we've done, we've seen that there's been an unprecedented backlash concerning the censoring of these students, concerning the censoring of educators, and concerning the censoring of parents and carers. So this webinar today is going to be a resource for people to use to combat this oppression and to also help us imagine new ways of action to be used in schools in solidarity with not just Palestine, but areas all over the world currently experiencing genocide due to colonial imperial exploitation, such as in Congo, such as in Tigray, such as in Abyei, in Sudan. All these places are experiencing genocide. And these genocides, if you look behind them, they all have the same benefactors, they all have the same funders, they all have the same people they all have the same nations, these same states that are actually collectively involved in these genocides. So that's definitely that's what we're doing today. And then in terms of the outline of the event, first I wanted to read some of the surveys that have been going out. So I'm just gonna some of the survey results that we took in terms of just for us to understand what exactly is going on. So we sent a survey out along with our registration link, and we've received around 30 responses, from all over the country. And in terms of what people are being told about Palestine in their schools, someone once said that nothing at all is being said. That an assembly done by the head teacher simply spoke of the pain in the Middle East. Palestine was not named. People have been told that Gaza cannot be mentioned because it's political to be mentioned. There was an assembly where it was both sides in terms of the October 7th attack and the disproportionate Palestinian losses. They were compared to be the same thing, when we know that the October 7th attack was an act of abolition. It was an act of actively going against the oppression that people in Palestine have been facing for over 75 years. Nothing else has been said, nothing else has been addressed, nothing else has been updated, and it's continuously been told to us that it's radio silence that people are hearing. Radio silence, radio silence, radio silence. That's what people are hearing. So today, we have various speakers of different positionalities that will give us insight into a number of important things in regards to organizing in schools. We'll have speakers address the importance of political education, knowing your legal rights when it comes to speaking about Palestine, as well as strategies for resistance and solidarity from different perspectives, such as how students can move in solidarity with Palestine, how teachers can move in solidarity with Palestine, and how parents and carers can organize in solidarity in Palestine, with Palestine. So we will also have a Q&A at the end, in which the floor is open for anyone to ask any questions that they want to be answered. So the first speaker that we have today is going to be from Liberty, which is a human rights organization. They're going to be speaking on knowing your rights and the legal context of Palestine. So I'm going to let them go. Nazmi, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, Emmanuel. Thanks for introducing me. So yeah, my name's Nazmo, and thank you all for attending and spending your evening with us. I'm not sure if you want me to start ahead or did you want to sort of introduce everyone first?
You can go, Nazmi. Just go.
Okay, cool, perfect, cool. So yeah, I was just looking at the participant numbers, and it was a bit daunting, but then sort of I think that's a bit outweighed from sort of the feeling of gratitude and everyone spending your evening with us in this sort of really important space. So as part of this really important and timely discussion on showing solidarity for Palestine in schools, I want to talk to you about your rights when doing so and how you can stand up for them and others too, even in difficult situations where schools and other public authorities like the police attempt to suppress those rights. So I've tried to take into account the different perspectives, so from young people in schools to parents and also teachers as public sector workers. Some background to Liberty and what I do. So Liberty, as sort of Emmanuel alluded to, we're an organization which stands up for people's human rights and civil liberties through various campaigns, legal cases, and projects with community groups. I manage the advice and information team, whose work is to empower people about their rights and by creating resources, delivering projects, and working alongside community groups like No More Exclusion. And yeah, we also advise members of the public. And that's sort of, yeah, that's a little cheeky plug. But I want to have this discussion in sort of an empowering way rather than bog you down in too much of the law and focus on a rights-based approach. I'm not sure sort of how it will work, but feel free to ask questions and chime in as we go along. I'll also sort of leave my email in the chat later on. So if you guys have any follow-up questions or concerns, you can feel free to get in touch with me as well. So yeah, there's been attempts over the years, and we've seen more recently of the government trying to put people off from expressing solidarity and having these important conversations about the atrocities that are happening around the world and that the UK are actively complicit in. So I'll split my discussion into two parts. So the first part is your human right to freedom of expression and protest and how that should operate in schools. And part two is about the use of counterterrorism strategies called PREVENT, which has been used to try and put students off from having these conversations around Palestine or criticizing the government's actions, and what your rights are if you've been caught up in the PREVENT program, and some practical tips to protect yourself and others who might have been caught up in this PREVENT strategy as well. So firstly, on your right to freedom of expression. So in a functioning democracy, people, especially young people, must be able to stand up to power and make their voices heard. Some of the biggest changes in society have come from society demanding change through protest and expressions of solidarity. Almost all the rights we cherish and benefit from today, whether it's the right to vote or the right to decent working conditions, exist in part because people took to the streets to demand change. This includes people from all different backgrounds and beliefs, as we're seeing with the Palestine protests. Despite what ministers are saying about people taking to the streets to demand the end of a genocide, including describing us as Islamist mobs and extremists, you're legally allowed to express support for the Palestinian people and criticize the actions of Israel, including in the form of a protest. Your right to expression is protected by Article 10 of the European Convention on Human Rights. So this means that we're free to hold opinions and ideas and share them with others without public authorities interfering. In addition to your Article 10 rights, you also have the right to freedom of association and assembly under Article 11 of the European Convention. This is your right to protest. So everyone has the right to associate with others and gather together for a common purpose, such as supporting Palestine and demanding the end to the occupation. The Human Rights Act requires public authorities to act in a way that is compatible with your rights under the convention, which includes Article 10 and Article 11. And it allows you to bring a claim in UK courts when your rights are violated by a public authority. So public authorities can include the police, local authorities, and schools too. Your right to freedom of expression and protest can only be limited in very exceptional circumstances by public authorities. And any limitation has to be covered by the law. It has to be necessary and proportionate, and it has to pursue a legitimate aim. For example, national security or public safety, which are some sort of common excuses. I also wanted to briefly touch on Article 14 of the Convention, which says that we shouldn't be treated unfairly or differently or denied our rights, including our right to protest because of our gender, age, race, religion, or political beliefs, disability, or anything else. And if you feel that any of your rights are being violated or interfered with, for example, sort of your right to protest at school or sort of your right to freedom of expression in schools, there's sort of a number of actions you can take. So always ask the schools for their reason if that ever comes into play. So and get their reasons in writing as well, why they've made certain decisions and interfered with your rights, and point out any hypocrisy as well. So if you've been allowed to express support for other causes, but not this particular one, ask them why and what the reason is. And also feel free to raise with certain teachers or staff who you might feel aligned or comfortable with as well. Build a collective voice and rally others together in sort of any correspondence to show that you're not alone. So just touching on that, you can write to the public authorities, so in this case, the school, and remind them of their legal obligations under the Human Rights Act and ask them to rectify the situation. So stop interfering with my freedom of expression and my right to protest. And as you can also sort of go down the legal route as well. So you might also be able to bring a case to court, which might find that particular action or inaction by a public authority is or might be unlawful. So it can tell the public authority, for example, the school, to stop interfering with your right or to take action to protect your right. It's best to get in touch with a law firm that specializes in public and human rights law and who can provide you with legal advice and the merits of sort of any potential claims. So moving on to the PREVENT strategy. So the government has a long history of creating narratives of the violent suspicious, other, to justify introducing horrific policies that strip people of their human rights and create this sort of mythical enemy to the state in order to suppress dissent and political opposition. So as part of the war on terror following 9/11, the PREVENT strategy was introduced in the UK as the flagship counter-extremism policy, with the aim of preventing the radicalization of individuals to terrorism. So originally in 2003, it was developed to focus exclusively on Muslims and target violent extremist ideology. But since 2011, the policy has been sort of widened, and in theory, at least, to focus on all forms of non-violent extremism, which can create an atmosphere conducive to terrorism and can popularize views which terrorists can then exploit. So this sort of theory, it works off of the conveyor belt sort of understanding, where people are presumed to move from extremist groups or from extremism into terrorist-related activity. So PREVENT was formalized into law through Section 26 of the Counter-Terrorism and Security Act 2015, which imposed the PREVENT duty, which you guys might have come across or heard. And this duty is imposed on public authorities, which includes the police, schools, nurseries, universities, social services, and healthcare providers. So the PREVENT duty requires public bodies to have due regard to the need to prevent people from being drawn into terrorism. So this means that public bodies, including schools, police, nurseries, whatever, can monitor and make referrals to expert officers in the local police force about people they suspect are vulnerable to radicalization. And public bodies must also avoid exposing people to extremist views, for example, by inviting people who hold extremist views to do talks, for example, at school. So just tying it back into the overall conversation in terms of why the PREVENT duty is particularly relevant to this wider discussion we're having. The PREVENT duty has been used as a tool to suppress voices showing solidarity for Palestine in schools, particularly in recent months. So this organization called Cage International, who has sort of fought against repressive counter-terrorism sort of measures since the war on terror began. They've reported being approached by a number of young people who have been referred to PREVENT after simply showing support, sort of completely peaceful support for Palestine in schools. I think they've reported over sort of 30 referrals made to them by young people. So just going over sort of the PREVENT process, for those of you who might not have come across it. So what happens if you've been referred to PREVENT? So if a public sector worker, for example, a teacher, makes a PREVENT referral, it's first assessed and screened by the local police for genuine vulnerability related to counter-terrorism. And that referral is then passed to a multi-agency panel of professionals, which includes the local authority and the police, to assess whether that person is suitable for PREVENT specialist support scheme called Channel. So if the Channel panel decides that a person is at risk, they will be invited to join the Channel program, which takes a multi-agency approach to identify and provide support to individuals who are at risk of being drawn into terrorist-related activity. And this can include mentoring, theological guidance, and careers assistance. And the details of each PREVENT referral, including personal details and reasons for the referral, are added to the PREVENT case management system database by police forces. And government material on PREVENT says that personal details that should be recorded on this database and when a referral is made should include the person's name, their religion, their social media name, their ethnicity, their nationality, their main language, their immigration or asylum status, and any additional family details, and also details on their neurodivergence, mental health, and emotional health, and other cultural factors. So unless an application for the deletion of those records is made, sort of if a PREVENT referral has been made, which I'll touch on in a bit more detail shortly, records on this database are retained for at least 6 years under the police's national data policy. So we've heard a lot about radicalization and extremism, but how has the government defined this for the purposes of PREVENT and identifying people for PREVENT? So what sort of things might have swept people up? So the government in the past has defined extremism as vocal or active opposition to fundamental British values, including democracy, the rule of law, individual liberty, and mutual respect and tolerance of different faiths and beliefs. So in practice, in the context of PREVENT, the PREVENT program, the definition of extremism has been applied in a very wide and uncertain manner. There's been a recent Guardian article about an official Prevent document, which includes believing in socialism, communism, anti-fascism, and anti-abortion in the list of potential signs of ideologies leading to terrorism. It's completely ridiculous and sort of that zero sort of logical rationale, apart from just shutting down voices that dare to challenge sort of this racist, divisive, authoritarian government. And they want to call people who dare to protest and stand up for their rights as the ones attacking democracy, which is sort of very ironic and very, very stupid. So Michael Gove, a very sort of facially challenged person, the Secretary of State for the Department of Levelling Up, Housing and Communities. He's set to drop sort of new guidance on the definition of extremism tomorrow in a government announcement. This is guidance only, so it's non-statutory. So it won't give the police or any sort of other law enforcement powers to deal with non-compliance with the guidance. But it's sort of unclear how this new definition of extremism is going to sort of interact with the current statutory and sort of legal guidance on Prevent, and whether this new definition is going to shape the Prevent strategy moving forward. So it's still speculation at this point. You know, as of 8:23 p.m. But the updated definition of extremism is apparently going to be the promotion or advancement of ideology based on hatred, intolerance, or violence, or undermining or overturning the rights or freedom of others, or undermining democracy itself. As I sort of mentioned, the last bit particularly concerning, considering the government itself undermines democracy multiple times and gets taken to court multiple times for this. But I doubt they see themselves as extremists, though. Some case examples of how Prevent has been ridiculously used to identify extremism in the past. And it would be laughable if it wasn't the reality for thousands of people. So a 4-year-old Muslim boy was referred to Prevent in 2013 after talking about the video game Fortnite at an after-school club. In November 2023, North Yorkshire police turned up to someone's doorstep following a Prevent referral that was made after she tweeted "from the river to the sea," which, as you guys will be aware, is a Palestinian slogan of solidarity and liberation. And in 2021, an 11-year-old primary school student was referred to Prevent after a teacher misheard the student say that he wanted to give arms for the oppressed, and instead they heard "give arms to the oppressed," as in ARMS, instead of ALMS. Yeah, completely ridiculous. So human rights and community organizations are deeply concerned by the use of the Prevent duty. Since its introduction and all the rhetoric around it, the Prevent program has increased the feeling of suspicion, isolation, and stigmatization that our communities have historically faced by public authorities. A disproportionate number of Muslims, young people, and neurodiverse people have been referred to Prevent. And yeah, so many Prevent referrals have been based on incorrect connections between expressions of faith, solidarity, and political dissent, and extremism and radicalization. A research by Amnesty in their recent report on Prevent has found that Prevent referrals have resulted in mental health consequences and people modifying their behavior, including refraining from participating in protests and expressing their political and religious views because they fear being flagged and, you know, stigmatized and associated with Prevent. As a Muslim growing up in the majority Muslim school in Tower Hamlets, it was like probably the most pro-Palestine borough in England. It sort of became sort of a dark joke about us being reported to Prevent for like completely normal things, like, oh, we're off to do Friday prayers, we're going to get reported to Prevent. Like, it was sort of our way of sort of coping with sort of the reality of the situation. And yeah, just to emphasize why Prevent is so useless. So in the year ending March 2023, over 90% of the 6,817 Prevent referrals did not meet the criteria for intervention as part of the channel program. I don't know about you, but that sounds pretty useless and ineffective. And it begs the question, why is it even in place if it doesn't appear to be identifying people at risk and it has all these serious harms on people? So moving on to your rights, if you or someone you know, or you know, someone you might have become aware has been referred to Prevent, or if it's been threatened, you can and should stand up to the use of Prevent and help others stand up to Prevent as well. So Prevent referrals do not appear on your criminal record, nor do they result in any form of sanction. The Prevent program is not targeted towards any specific age group, even though it does disproportionately affect young people. Once a Prevent referral is made, engaging with the Prevent program, including participation in the channel scheme, is completely voluntary. So for children who have been referred to Prevent, consent to participate in the channel program has to be given by a parent or guardian. People who have been referred to Prevent are often approached for questioning or informal chats by counter-terrorism police or SO15 officers or social workers to discuss their political, cultural, or religious beliefs. If you're approached for any questioning about your cultural, religious, or political beliefs, it's important to find out the real question why they want to speak to you. You should exercise your general right to ask questions to find out more information, including why a referral was made, why they want to speak to you, and which organizations are involved in the referral and what powers they're using. It's important to keep a record of these answers by asking for any sort of correspondence to be in writing, for example, through letters or emails, and/or keep your own note of the information that you've been provided. So for young people, make sure you have an appropriate adult, like a parent, carer, or guardian, present during any conversations or questioning, and refuse to engage if they aren't present. And yeah, as I mentioned, engagement with the Prevent program, once a referral has been made, cannot be presented as mandatory, even if police officers or staff and other public sector workers try and say that it is. For time purposes, I won't go into too much detail about this. There's a process to request the removal of your records if you have been referred to Prevent, and that involves writing to your local police force and asking them to sort of delete the information, i.e. the Prevent referral records, and explain why you want them deleted as well. And that should trigger a review by the police to sort of consider it. And depending on sort of whether they refuse or not, you could possibly challenge that refusal to delete your records legally. But you need to speak to a sort of a solicitor firm specializing in public law or claims against public authorities. So some practical advice for parents. This is from Cage, who have extensive experience representing and supporting people, including young people and parents referred to Prevent. And they've produced some very useful guidance on their website, which NME have sort of flagged. That they flagged on Twitter. So once Prevent is mentioned, you should speak to your child about their rights that we just went through. And as indicated, you or your child only need to answer Prevent-based questions when you're in attendance with your child, you understand who you're speaking to and have their contact details, you understand why the questions are being asked, and you've sought legal advice. And I'll signpost to some amazing organizations who deal specifically in this work in a moment. And if your child has been approached and questioned about their political views or religious practice by a staff member or Prevent officer without your consent or your presence, you can file and you should file a formal complaint to the school or the relevant police force. So now moving on, if you're a teacher, I'm very conscious of time, and is it okay just for Sahra and Emmanuel if I run a couple of minutes over just to sort of go through this? I promise I did do a practice run and it didn't take as long, but maybe it's the nerves. But yeah, so if you're a teacher, there's some separate advice about how you can resist Prevent, as this is a tool to suppress dissent in both Palestine context and generally as well. So the 2011 Prevent strategy identifies education as a priority sector, claiming that sympathy for terrorism is highest among young people. In the year ending 31st of March 2023, children aged 11 to 15 accounted for nearly 40% of Prevent referrals. The relevant guidance for England and Wales says that schools, to comply with the Prevent duty, they're expected to assess the risk of children being drawn into terrorism, including support for extremist ideas that are part of terrorist ideology, and if appropriate, refer them to the channel program. The guidance makes clear that schools could face adverse consequences for non-compliance with Prevent obligations. So schools are expected to have robust procedures for sharing information about vulnerable people and also undergo Prevent training. And it's Ofsted who monitors schools' compliance with the Prevent duty. But the Prevent duty means that public sector workers like teachers, are obligated to have due regard for the Prevent duty, but they're not obligated to report young people to Prevent. They have to weigh up the Prevent duty against other obligations and considerations that they're required to sort of have in mind. For example, the welfare of children under the Children's Act, and also their obligations under the Equality Act to not discriminate, and also the Human Rights Act obligations, which we've touched on before, sort of your right to protest and your freedom of expression as well. So essentially, as with all public sector workers who fall under the Prevent duty, school staff are contractually obliged to fulfill all relevant trainings required, including on Prevent. This does mean, however, there's no specific duty on individual members of staff to actually report people to Prevent. They just need to show that they had fulfilled their training and had due regard, and aka they assessed the risk. We when I say I, can't actively encourage people to refuse the prevent training, because we've known of staff who have faced disciplinary and potential sort of disciplinary consequences as a result. But instead, we can encourage people to focus more on trying to reach as many people as possible for counter trainings on the harms of prevent, which facilitate discussions on increasing awareness about the harms of prevent and the impact it has on students, and furthering the surveillance state and criminalization of sort of young people, and particularly from Muslim backgrounds or from neurodiverse sort of capabilities. And yeah, it's also those counter trainings are also needed to like promote and encourage rights that young people do have and help them realize their rights and sort of facilitate those rights as well. Yeah, and like if you can take away anything, I just want to sort of highlight some incredible organizations to get support if you have been referred to prevent. And the first of which, they're community-based organizations who've been supporting people caught up in prevent from all different backgrounds. So the first organization is Cage International, who's a casework service. If you want to challenge a prevent referral and or need support and advice if you've been referred to prevent. Prevent Watch is a similar organization. And both these organizations, Cage and Prevent Watch, have published a number of resources on prevent and standing up for your rights in certain scenarios. Cage in particular have prepared a resource on supporting Palestinian schools, which NME have shared and which they can share again, I'm sure, but which I highly recommend you reading. And also want to flag Maslaha, who will be speaking later today, and two programs in particular. So firstly, their Schools with Roots program, where they offer a range of strategies to support UK primary schools to develop a sustainable and anti-racist practice around engaging with their local communities and families. And the second project, which is the Coming Home project, where they're working with Tariq Yunus to provide free therapeutic support or counselling services to those, particularly Muslims, impacted by state surveillance and policing mechanisms such as prevent. And just to sort of close off on sort of hopefully an uplifting note, I just want to say how important it is for people in schools, from young people to staff to parents, to know about and stand up for your rights and the rights of others, whether that's in this context of expressing support for Palestine in school, and also other attempts to clamp down on dissent, because this won't be the first or last desperate attempt by the government to create divide and silence people and demonize certain organizations in times of serious political pressure. With Prevent and the attempt to suppress voice of Palestinian support, it's just a recent entry in a history of government attempts to paint us as the villains and trample over our rights because they don't think we know better. So it's really important to build community and create bonds of trust, safety, understanding, and compassion with each other, because the government and police have shown how they see and treat young people, especially those from marginalized and racialized backgrounds. And policies like Prevent just serve to break those communities and relationships and trust apart. So it's up to us to create sort of that solidarity and support. And I hope sort of events like this sort of are serving that purpose, and you'll sort of benefit from each other. And just to cap off, things to take with you anywhere, just when it comes to your right to political expression in school, whether it's in this Palestine context or anywhere else. Question decisions and comments made about you and your beliefs. Ask them what's their rationale, what powers they're acting under. Make sure you remind them of your rights, particularly, your Article 10 right to expression and your rights under the Human Rights Act. Get answers from, whoever makes the decisions in writing as well. And make sure you have an appropriate adult if you're a young person, whenever there's certain meetings about sort of your faith or sort of your beliefs. And yeah, always ask questions and ask people to explain themselves. Don't take things lying down when it comes to what you believe in. And be there for people that are going through sort of similar situations as well. Oh, sorry.
You. No, thank you so much for sharing the wisdom and knowledge that I knew you was going to bring.
Right. Can I just end off with a very cheeky plug at the end as well?
Okay, just a short cheeky plug.
We're sort of Liberty, we're developing an advice on sort of your rights under Prevent, which we hope to publish in the next week or so. We'll send a copy to NME to sort of share, hopefully, as well. And that will sort of put a lot of what I've just said in writing for you to refer to. So hopefully that can be another resource that we can lean on if you need as well.
We always love a little cheeky plug. But yeah, as I said, thank you for sharing your wisdom and knowledge. I know you have to also go to pray Tarawih. So you can also email Liberty, as you said, that the resource will be shared next week. And we also thought to kickstart it It's about like, yeah, like what is our rights? And that is also our anchor in a sense of like what can, not necessarily, we also know in this Babylon country, what does rights even look like? But it's important to know what's on paper so we can organize justly. But I'll pass it on to Maslaha, Alia, and Aisha. And you can kickstart with what Masla is because what you're doing is amazing. And I know your words will be way more better. So I'll just pass it on to you.
Thanks, and thanks, Nazbul, for the shout out. Also, so it's coming home, I think somebody asked in the questions, which is the Muslim therapy for people who have been incarcerated or affected by incarceration. So yeah, we're an organisation called Maslaha. I'm Alia. We explore what liberation looks like in our community, whether it's in education, gender, healthcare, the criminal punishment system, and why are so many people in our community incarcerated, censored, and policed. Maslaha in Arabic means common good, and it's our duty as Muslims and people committed to liberation for all to act within this common good and Maslaha, particularly in Ramadan as well. We know we create our own practices and we liberate our people, creating and dreaming and building alternatives. And that's why we're here today, to explore how we do this. But we can only do this if we center the voices of young people. So I'm going to pass on to Aisha, who is an incredible facilitator with us, a young person, and who will share lots of her wisdom today. So yeah, shout out to Aisha.
Hi guys. I just I'm a young person, but I'm also a facilitator at Maslaha, working specifically on Muslim girl fencing. I mean, everything we do is rooted in local communities and the relationships we build in them. We recognize and rely on the knowledge and expertise that exists in our communities. For example, in Muslim girl fencing, we are giving them a platform to speak, which is also a form of liberating our community. I just want to start off with a quote. Without community, there is no liberation, but community must not mean a shedding of our differences, nor the pathetic pretense that these differences do not exist. This quote is from Audre Lorde. I'm going to start off with what happening in Palestine relates to wider issues around prevent, exclusions, and police in schools. When you talk about Palestine, you need to also talk about the repercussions that young people would have to face in order to talk about it. Policies like prevent and exclusions criminalize everyday Muslim, Black, brown behavior. It perceives us as inherently a risk to be controlled. In moments of trauma, like genocide, these tools go into overdrive because it is frightening for those in power to see Muslim, Black, brown people protesting and collectively fighting for liberation across borders. We have to be controlled. Our right to protest, say what we want, and even our grief will be managed and controlled as long as there are tools like prevent. Tomorrow, as I think a lot of you guys know, the government plans to expand the definition of extremism, which is a dangerous move, especially for Muslim communities that are already targeted by Islamophobic policies like prevent. The work I'm doing at Maslaha and my experience growing up in Imperial Core, I can see how children are being censored and punished by expressing our collective grief and resisting colonial normalization and repressive school regimes. We're not allowed and punished when we organise a bake sale, wear solidarity badges, ask for a moment of silence, or even stand up for Palestinian liberation. Instead, we're being excluded, interrogated, moved out of our classes, and referred to prevent. The effect of prevent is that young people aren't able to express themselves and express their beliefs or support Palestine without the fear of repercussions. Even for me to talk in this webinar is a big thing in itself, as I'm still in education, and this wouldn't be talked about freely in schools and colleges. When talking about Palestinian liberation in schools, you also have to mention systems like prevent. However, despite this, young people are still fighting for Palestinian liberation, and it remains in all of our conversations and should remain in all of our conversations. Yeah, I'm going to hand that on to Alia.
That was amazing, Aisha. Incredible. So we're going to talk a bit more about actually some examples of the school, like 2 boroughs that we're working in London, and one of them is Ealing. So just to root us back in actually the tradition, Ealing has a rich history of radical Black-led organising around education. This is the same borough which our comrade and a teacher, Blair Peach, was murdered during an anti-racist demonstration against the fascist far right in the National Front by a Special Patrol Group in 1979. It's the same borough, but busing, which was started by Harold Wilson's Labour government in 1965, which made which dispersed any immigrant children if they numbered more than 30% in the local schools. This dispersal became known as busing, which is a racist response to the visible presence and organised skill force of the regions of the Caribbean, Asia, and Africa. Busing created a generation of children from families that migrated from South Asia and the Caribbean who were bussed out to attend school. This isn't dissimilar to the same phenomenon that was experienced in the segregation in the South in the US. This happened across the country. This was brought down by organising. And when we're talking about, which Aisha's also said, about collective organising, by youth-led organising, it was led by young people, by parents, by students, by the community in Ealing to get rid of busing in 1976. It was also sparked by the racist murder of Gurdeep Singh Chaggar in Southall by a group of young white people. But again, it was the community that organised against this and resisted. This is the same borough as well, where Eric and Jessica Huntley ran the Walter Rodney bookshop and the Bogle Overture publications. I probably said that wrong, but they were the pioneers in Black radical writing and publishing. They were also the founding members of the Caribbean Education and Community Workers Association. They helped develop the Black Parents Movement in 1975 after the arrest and assault by the police by a black schoolboy named Cliff McDaniel outside his school. This is the same organisation that built across borders solidarity in South Africa, Grenada, and Guyana. And it also established the supplementary school move in Ealing, created a supplementary school system education for Black children that were being failed by a broken education system. I guess why I'm saying this is that there's a legacy here of grassroots community organising of educators, parents, young people organising together. And I think that if you look at your local area, I'm sure there's also a history of resistance against racist education systems. So we're currently working with a primary school in Ealing in which parents and children wanted to organise a bake sale to raise funds for Gaza after October the 7th. Other parents complained. They threatened to call the police on other parents, on children for a bake sale. The head teacher then had to cancel the bake sale, send them a letter to all of these parents. But the parents got organised. They were like, "Halas, this is not happening." Parents every day at the pickup, at drop off, they came and tried to speak to the teachers. They were petitioning, they were organising, and they demanded meetings with the head teacher. They found out that their school was a UNICEF rights respecting school. So they wrote a letter to UNICEF. They wrote a letter to the board of governors. They wrote multiple letters. They wrote collective letters. They asked us to get involved. And then in the end, actually now the head teacher issued an apology. They are now working together, leading with the parents and with the students to create more anti-racist practice in their school. This is an example when collective action wins and that there is power in numbers. But it's also in this same borough, we're also working, and this is different in primary schools, and we know this in terms of organising in secondary schools. We're working with parents in the secondary school in Ealing as well. We've had multiple instances of collective punishment in this school. One child has been internally excluded since December for standing up to a bully. That's a whole term of them not being in school. We've heard also in the same school, a child whose family is in Gaza asking for a minute of silence, which is similar to what they did for Ukraine, being told no, and also as a result, they were asked to leave the classroom. In the same school, when another student has spoken up against their teacher, wanting to talk about the genocide, they were also asked to leave the classroom and then was removed from the same classroom with this teacher and moved to a different, maths class, essentially, with a different teacher. Children in the school are being punished for wearing keffiyehs, for showing Palestinian flags and badges, and standing up against settler normalization. I'm sharing this to say that there is resistance in schools, there's resistance amongst young people, but also we're hearing the impact of this is having on their mental health and their well-being. Children are feeling unsafe in school. They're being referred to CAMS because of this, their mental health services, and they're unable to face going into school. We know that this state is designed to oppress us, criminalize us, and exclude us. And I guess what we're trying to say is, what I'm trying to ask, and I know that your screens on the thing, but you can also email me, it's collectively and materially, what was we as a group of maybe 100 people in this group how are we going to organize to support the school? We've helped to write them letters in support. As Master has an organization, we're helping them to write letters to board of governors, letters to head teachers, letters to the council, recording instances of punishments, linking them with lawyers. But I guess this isn't an isolated incident. And so when we break out of this isolation in which so many students and parents and people in our community, which exist in because it's designed by the state, we have to ask ourselves how we materially supporting each other as well, to support particularly our young people to be able to access education, to be able to voice their opinion, and to organize. I'm going to pass on now back to the incredible Aisha to share some more wisdom from a student perspective and how she's helping to organize in schools and hamlets.
Thank you, Alia. I think what you said was great. Just to add on to that, I think other examples of how students have organized and resisted and supported Palestinian liberation, I think I'm going to talk about that, such as in Luton Sixth Form College, students organized a walkout with hundreds of students out of their classes to oppose their college's partnership with an aerospace company supplying the Israeli military. And because of this, the college suspended all activities and relationships with the company. I think the important thing to cover is that collective action wins. In Ilford, East London, around 300 students boycotted and walked out of an assembly with Labour's shadow minister, West Streeton, over his party's position on Israel-Palestine. I think what we can learn from this is that young people have the will to resist. And the question is, do they have the resources? At Maslaha, we're working with young people in Bradford to help them organise to make the school BDS and get rid of Israeli products in their school. I'm going to speak about a specific example of a school I've been facilitating in, Muslim Girl Fence sessions in Tower Hamlets, which has had waves of Palestinian resistance throughout the years. For context, in May 2021, during Ramadan, when Palestinian families in Sheikh Jarrah and occupied East Jerusalem began protesting and resisting Israel's plan to forcibly evict them from their homes to make way for settlers, which sparked demonstration across Palestine to support the families against shared experience of settler colonization. I think it's important to mention that they were met with excessive, deadly, devastating military offensives by Israel, with thousands injured, arrested, and detained. However, it did not only spark protests in Palestine, but also protests here in London. The students of the school I mentioned experienced collective grief and resistance. They wore symbols of solidarity like flags, badges, and kufiyas, which were all banned in the school at the time. As a result, Year 10 students all organized during the assembly to paint Palestinian flags on their hand, hold them up, and walk out during the assembly. This is a moment of collective action and resistance across borders. Since October 7th, we have seen in the same school more and more students wearing stickers, badges, flags, and kafiyas. But I've also heard some of the students we work with say they hide their badges from certain teachers that they know will punish them for wearing symbols of solidarity. Again, showing how we are silencing and punishing students for resistance and solidarity. In the same place that they walked out of, they are now having that fear of wearing symbols of solidarity. However, they continue to do so, showing the resistance of students in school. We have also created, alongside a group of girls, a sign in the same school called Our Voice Uprising, which is a call to action as a way to resist, to raise our voices, to teach other people what we care about. They created comics, poetry about Palestine, shared their stories of being a refugee. They even wrote a comic strip about the Palestinian women's movement in the first Intifada, and they've done much more. We wanted to publish it this year, but the school again censored design and wouldn't let them publish it because they wrote River to the Sea and created an Arabic chant list. It shows that although there continued effort in talking about Palestine, they are not able to. However, when there are problems, there are solutions. So one way we've tackled this is something that I'm facilitating at the moment alongside Alia in response to the censorship of their work. I'm facilitating and creating with them because I think it's important to mention that it's their work just as much as it's mine. But we are producing a podcast about their the complexities and beauty of being a Muslim girl in the heart of the empire. They want to recreate the discussions that we're already having and record it in order to share their experience with other people. I think the main goal for this, in my eyes, is to provide them spaces and resources that they need in order for them to express their beliefs, which was a liberty taken from them not only by schools, but also the systems placed by our government. To dive into that, we are also exploring the topics of home, family, Palestine, racism, Islamophobia, and sexism, which is a lot because young people have a lot to talk about. It's so important for us to give the tools to young people to explore, learn, dream, and imagine without fears of repercussions, censorship, policing, and punishment. It is important to create spaces where they feel confident to resist, organize against oppressive regimes, prevent and the policing of our communities try to make us not speak up. This is why it is important to give the resources and spaces to speak up. Outside of school, this is why events like this are important for young people to learn how to organize and resist. We've been talking about how schools can be a site of harm. So Maslaha has given me a budget for me to organize a community iftar gathering to bring together members of our local communities of Shepherd's Bush in a spirit of unity, compassion, and solidarity, with a deep commitment to fostering understanding and empathy. This event aims to provide a platform for individuals to from all diverse backgrounds to come together, break bread, and build bridges of mutual respect and cooperation. We will learn together from elders and youngers, which is also an important thing, as I think the communication between youngers and elders is important, and I don't think that's something as common right now. So I also want to emphasize that. Recognizing the importance of raising awareness about pressing humanitarian issues, particularly, as mentioned as before, Palestine and Sudan. This gathering seeks to inspire action and support for those in need while celebrating the richness of our shared humanity, especially during Ramadan. We should be giving the tools for young people to lead. These spaces outside of Prevent Babylon is so important to be led by young people to learn, resist, and organize together, where we can make mistakes, learn new things, and again, without the fear of repercussions or prevent punishment and policing. I keep repeating that because the importance of this, I think the main issue with young people talking about Palestine is the fear of what's going to happen after. And the examples of Ealing and Tower Hamlets are not isolated events. We're hearing from our work. We know this is happening across the countries. There's many more stories. We must ask the broader implications on our children's learning and well-being when they don't feel safe expressing their thoughts, feelings, and opinions and identities in school. I genuinely believe that being tired of talking about Palestine and seeing stories about Palestine, it's not an option. They're not Palestinian people are not given that liberty of being tired because they're living it. So this is their everyday life that they're living. So I think that we should carry on creating spaces like this, carry on giving young people the platform to speak, and inshallah, Palestine will be free.
I'm in awe with what you just said. You said so many amazing points, and I also want to honor you because to be 16 and come in a space and talk such wisdom and knowledge, and share from your own personal experience is fire. So when we say that the youth is leading, we're actually meaning the youth are leading in our revolution. Our revolutionaries have always been young, and yeah, you're my revolutionary leader. So we're gonna just take a 5-minute break because the wisdom has been shared, the knowledge has been shared, but there's so much knowledge gonna come. So I hope everyone just takes a 5-minute breather, hold what information has been said, and we'll come back with even more wisdom and knowledge and an intergenerational conversation.
What we're gonna do now, real quick, is we're gonna get back into it. And our next speaker that will be speaking is going to be speaking on resistance and solidarity strategies from an educator perspective. So they're going to speak on how educators can leverage their position to support young people's freedom of expression, their association and solidarity with Palestine. So we're going to have a speaker called Lana Crosby, also a member of NME, No More Exclusions. So they're going to come forward and speak.
Evening, everyone. Can you all hear me? Yep, excellent. Okay, I'm going to talk about how in my own school I have managed to build resistance, but build political awareness and build, I guess, the outcome has been a acceptance of what we're doing. So my role is a assistant principal in a secondary school, and the part of my role and my responsibilities are to look at the pastoral side. So I would look at things like safeguarding, behavior and culture and ethos. I also do the anti-racism training, so quite a broad remit. And I have a number of students under my remit who were very interested in looking at fundraising for Palestine and Gaza. And they came and spoke to me because they felt that I would be a kindred spirit, if you like, in the protesting. And I absolutely said, yes, that's fine. I knew we would have some resistance because there always is resistance to anything that appears very radical. And within educational institutions, we have so many policies and so many procedures. It's made much more difficult to develop a political education for our young people because we have things such as the impartiality guidance, which gets thrown at you quite regularly. If you don't seem to be following it, that's something that would be picked at. So young people asked me, they wanted to do some things. I said, what would you like to do? So the first thing I did was give them a bit of an education around what exactly a political education is. So I wanted to hear what their thoughts were, what were their ideas, what were their values, just making sure that these young people were fully aware of what this was going to mean. And one of the things is one of my favorite quotes. So it's one that I've used with them. And I said, a man who stands for nothing will fall for anything, which was from Brother Malcolm. And I want to know what your values are. What are you feeling? What are you thinking? Where is this going? And explain to them what my feelings were. So I positioned myself. I made myself vulnerable to them and explained my views, my ideas, my thoughts, but also my pains, my traumas related to being a Black educator in Britain, to being a Black female, to having all those ills, the racism, the misogyny, the misogynoir, everything happening to me over the years, and explain to them that if I stand for something, I stand for it 100%. So if we're going in, we're going all in. And they were completely and utterly 100% on board with it. And I have several students who are actually from Palestine, who have family there and were not necessarily, I think, in the area where there was too much of what was happening, but on the outskirts, but were very worried about their family, very worried about things and wanted to stand up. They said they felt that it was time for them to demonstrate through action how much they felt about the situation, which I was very happy to support. But as with any institution, you have to work within the remit that you have. So I began with kind of setting the values with them, not for them, but with them. And it was really important that their student voice and that dialogue was being built by them, and it wasn't being built by me. I was there to facilitate and be the platform because of my presence and because of my role. I have the ability to be in spaces that they're not in. I have the ability to reach far and wide because I work within a trust, a multi-academy trust, so across the trust. And that's not something that they'd necessarily have access to. I ensured that the staff are aware and what they were doing and what they wanted to do, and made sure that I was the buffer for any concerns from the staff, and that we would sit and talk it through. The students would explain fully their views. So it's always about dialogue, it's always about communication, it's always about being open and kind of listening really carefully, to almost like doing a temperature check of what is the, if we dip our toe in the water, what's going to be the response. The students then developed, for want of a better term, a sort of student council, where they thought about the rules, the responsibilities, they thought about what it is they want to do, what is it they want to get from this, how far do they want to go with this. So it was an ongoing action, not just a moment in time. It was something they wanted to do over time. And we started by looking at one of the main things that was coming back in terms of how can I put it, reprisals from some staff members, actually, rather than parents, was actually from the staff. This isn't fair. What about Israel? What about this? What about that? This isn't part of our British values. So I had to really kind of dismantle British values with the staff, which is what I did. I explained that I understand that working in the institution, that's something that's part of our PSHE program. But if we were even to take a British value, which is not necessarily my own value, but one that I understand that I have a responsibility for as an educator, I don't necessarily have the freedom to fully say exactly how I feel. But what I did do was explain to them that if we were talking about that, one of those things is about tolerance. And I hate that word, but this was being completely intolerant. And this was not a British value, or actually it may well be. I then started to talk about hypocrisy, because I asked them about Ukraine. I said, some of you took refugees in, some of you discuss and you talk about how distressed you are about what happened. Does it only matter when it's white bodies and not brown bodies? Is that what we're talking about? And I really went in really hard, really quickly. And being a senior leader, I think my position meant that I guess what comes with that is a responsibility, but I have a responsibility to everybody, not just the people who speak up. So my view is, if we're talking about what we want is our young people to have a political conscience, we want them to have caring and empathy, we want them to get themselves involved in all these different things. Why is it only when it matters to you on topics that matter to you? Why is it only when it's white bodies, not brown bodies? What's the actual real difference here? Because I'm only starting to see a particular trail. And a lot of the teachers then kind of sat back, some literally, as in physically, others sort of metaphorically sat back and said, okay, I need to examine my own ideas. I said, yes, I think you do. I think you do need to examine your positionality in this situation, because actually what you're doing to these young people is you are destroying their voice. And you are attempting to mold them into something that you think they should be based on what you find acceptable. And actually, this is all about you. I've used the word you twice in the sentence. This tells me that this isn't even about the issue. This is actually about you personally. And if we're going down the road of impartiality, how is that even impartial? So I kind of use the system, if you like, to out people and explore what their biases might be. And I'm not somebody who's about unconscious bias, so I just started talking about it really honestly and said, well, this is for me just a form of discrimination and a form of exclusionary practice, and I'm not here to support that. I'm here to support an open dialogue where students have the right to protest, they have the right to freedom of speech. We have all these other rights, but only when it suits you. That's not a right, is it? That's you wielding and weaponizing things. So I started to develop more language around the situation and around what was happening with Israel and Palestine, and also along Gaza, because there are lots of different sort of intersecting conversations going on about what actually is going on over there. And some people who had what appeared to be quite strong views had very little idea of the actual atrocities that were going on and continue to do so. One of the other things that we did is I took some advice around safeguarding, because a couple of parents came forward and said, I feel very uneasy and my child might not be safe if they do this. So I explained, as a safeguarding need and as a strategic lead for safeguarding, I was able to talk about that. So I think my position and the different hats that I wear allowed me to position myself in a very positive way, so that I was able to have these conversations with multiple people and set the scene to help the students. They started off what I would call, one might say it was quite beige, in that it was a cake sale, and that was quite low key in comparison to some of the things that were going on in the city that I live in. But actually it was really helpful. They felt very empowered. They brought a henna artist in, so we had henna on the day. We had people doing hair. It was all very much a big, happy event. They then went to the lower end of the school where we had year 7, 8 and 9, and wanted to sell the rest of the food and offer the henna artist activities. And what I can tell you is the next day I had some emails back from some teachers saying, I just don't think that was appropriate. We're not allowed to be politically supportive of any particular cause. So I felt very uncomfortable when those students came in and asked if we would buy cakes and what have you. So I went and seen those teachers and I asked how uncomfortable did they feel about Ukraine? How uncomfortable do they feel about cancer research? How uncomfortable do they feel about all these other things? Or is it only the murder of George Floyd or the children in Palestine and the families in Palestine? And again, aren't we now starting to look at a particular view? And I basically told them they were being hypocrites. So I'm not sure if my approach is necessarily a favourable one, but it was very fierce, it was very unapologetic, and it was very direct, because the time for action is now. This isn't the time for us to kind of be shrinking flowers and not be sure about what we're saying. I was very clear, and I continue to be very clear, that my position is to support those who are being oppressed. My position is to use my voice, use my platform for good. It isn't to continue to silence people. It isn't continue to help people to feel comfortable in their comfort. I want to make you uncomfortable. I want this to be discomfort, because then you have almost one iota, even a tiny insight into how uncomfortable it must be not to be the part of the status quo and part of the majority. And if you really want to take that lens off, don't talk to me about unconscious bias training, for example. Don't talk to me about doing things that's right and then turn your back away from kids who are trying to do something good. Like, put your money where your mouth is, basically. So one of those things was the cake sale. Then we had flyers up, they had posters, they created resources for assembly. That then went across to the different year groups. And then one of the positive things that came from this, because the students started to research more, they started to educate. So it didn't even feel like it was a protest per se, it was educational moments. And that's how I phrased it. So that the parents, I sent information to the parents, explained this what we were doing. I explained why we stand up for those who are oppressed, why we stand shoulder to shoulder, and solidarity is not optical, it's real. And I can't think of one parent, to be honest, apart from the ones who were just concerned about safety, who came back and said, I'm not happy with this. Every single parent, and I count myself lucky in my position and within the school that I'm in, but maybe that's partly because of the influence of myself and some other very sort of conscious teachers, that we seem to have a cohort where the parents were actually on board to support. What that's then done is the young people then created some infographics, and they did this and they put this up in and around the school environment. They have also gone on to do more politically conscious seminars, is what they call them, and I let them run them. I stand sort of in the back and just make sure everything's okay. but they are the ones actually delivering the information. This is all about the student voice. This is not about me. This is all about them. And they don't get involved in kind of reliving trauma. What they talk about is, what are we going to do about this? We're not happy about this. What are we going to do? So it's a very solution focused approach. And what came from it was they enjoyed giving the education because they felt that they were reaffirming something positive. And from that, they've been asked to deliver some sessions at a conference where there will be, within our trust, there will be probably about 1,000 members of staff in our summer conference, where they will be standing at the front and talking about what they've done, why they've done it. And there will be people in that audience who will not necessarily be supportive of their view. However, it's really important that we speak out. It's really important that these young people know that they have this right to freedom of speech. They can't, they don't lose it just because they come into school. What they need to be able to do is not disrupt the policies, because that's where people start to become shaky. But what they can do is actually educate, and everything we talk, we frame it around educating others on the realities of the situation. We educate them on the experiences of people. We educate them on what this means going forward long term, what this means now. And whilst we do that, parallel to that is we make sure we continue to communicate with home. And whilst we're communicating with home, that's brought through some really rich conversations and really open dialogue, where communities are saying, well, I'll provide some food for this, or I'm happy to provide this space, or I'm happy to come in and talk. So we've got a couple of parents coming in to do some talks as well around what it means for them, what it means for their families, how it's making them feel, how supported they're feeling, and how it's developing that sense of belonging. And they can see their young people developing a sense of self-agency and a sense of self-esteem and identity, because they're not actually being shaped and molded. They're being allowed to grow and develop, and they're being allowed to have opportunities to develop more awareness. And that's been a really rich journey. It's not at the end. It's not without its problems. But I think what they have found really useful is having me, and there's at least, I would say, 2 other teachers who are very sort of politically aware, consciously aware, and also very unapologetic in our pursuit of justice. And we talk about social justice, and we use a lot of that language, for want of a better term, around students, and we learn together. So everything, rather than it feeling like something has happened, we must do something, and then we forget about it, we tend to build on it over time, and it becomes part of a positive legacy. So the next year group coming through can see what the other year group have done, and then they can then build on that, and it just becomes something that we do, and it becomes the thread, like the golden thread about everything that we do, and it runs through the sort of culture and the fabric of our culture. And that was really important to me, that this wasn't something we just did because lots of people were doing something. It was, if we're going to do it, as I said right at the top, if you stand for nothing, you'll fall for anything. I stand for justice. I stand for what is right. I am unapologetic. I don't ask for acceptance. I don't ask for anything. What I do is I say who I am. I say what I do. I spend time navigating systems which are really difficult, and I build the way for others. I want the younger generation to come in and take the load off me, and that's what they're doing. So I think what I would say is, when you're in an institution, one of the things you have to be aware of as a teacher is we do have lots of policies. As long as you're working within your policies, you are absolutely fine. As long as you are crafting what you are doing in the way of education, you are absolutely fine. You do not lose your right to protest and to have an opinion because you walk through the school gates. What you lose as you walk through that school gates is a sense of safety, potentially, because you worry about what the outcomes might be. But as long as you're working within your actual institution's policies and you're abiding by the guidance, you're absolutely fine. And encouraging those young people to take collective action and build that group has been really rich. And aside from this, they've done lots of other things like write Downing Street. They've written to the mayor of the city that we live in. They've done so much because they now feel empowered. And I'm not really a fan of the word empowered because I don't really want to feel like I'm giving you something you already had. But guess what I'm doing is enabling them to feel powered, enabling them to feel strong, enabling them to say, it's safe because I've got you. Whatever happens, I'm here and I've got you. And I think because my conviction was so strong and the conviction of others, that it drove a momentum that was difficult for anybody to argue with because it was rooted in justice. It was rooted in positive language. It was rooted in education. And it was rooted in what's right. You know, when we talked about values, it was really important. So I hope that's been useful. And yeah, I'll put my email in the chat in case anybody wants to email me.
Thank you so much. I did say earlier that wisdom and knowledge is going to be shared in this space. And what is beautiful is to hear it from so many different perspectives. Like the revolution is happening in so many different corners. It's going to happen by teachers, educators, by students, by youth, by community members, by elders, by young people, by your neighbors, inside your homes. So it's important that when we think about revolution, when we think about liberation, is being done in every corners. So we're fighting the belly of the beast. So there's many strategies that needs to be taken. And as you were speaking, I'm going to quickly read a quote before we move into the next point, because I'm such a quote lover. It's by Toni Morrison. So when you were speaking, it just reminded me of it, where she goes, when you get these jobs that you have been so brilliantly trained for, just remember that your real job is that if you're free, you need to free somebody else. And if you have some power, then your job is to empower somebody else. And that's our goal, right? Once we're in these positions, it's about how do we redistribute resources, knowledge, and and join the struggle towards like a free liberated Palestine and a liberated world. So thank you for sharing your knowledge. I was just like clicking my fingers. And there's a couple of more knowledge that's gonna be shared, and then we're gonna open it up to Q&As to get other people's wisdom, knowledge, questions, any clarifications that's needed. I'm gonna pass it on to Jay, who's a part of Just Education Matters. As we said, this is an intergenerational conversation that's needed. So she's gonna bring the perspectives of how through parents, through carers, and so much knowledge. I know knowledge is the word I keep saying, but I'll pass it to Jay.
Good evening. Oh, good evening, everyone. I'm part of 1/3 of an organisation called Just Education Matters. I'm not sure what I can actually add to that, all those amazing presentations. And I'm very, very honoured to be in this space with the amazing presentations that you've just heard. I'm a great believer in sharing the knowledge that you have with someone else. Otherwise, it's just information if you don't share it. I'll tell you a little bit about Just Education Matters, and what we focus on is school exclusion. So anything that is associated with school exclusions and challenging school exclusions. We focus mainly on early intervention. That's our key thing, because prevention is always better than cure. And for us, it's a bit of a dynamic in that we are actually trying to keep young people in an education system that we actually think is not broken. It's working exactly as it's designed to do, because it's set up that way. And it means that a good 50% of the students within the education system are not actually expected to succeed. And it's designed by purpose that way, because then they fill things like the mental health institutes and the prisons, that 50% that don't make it through. So what we try and do is we talk a lot about giving information to parents and communities, parents, carers and communities, about what the exclusion system looks like and how it actually operates, so that you're able to just challenge the entirety of that system. I was very interested in the talk given by the young man from Liberty. And as he was talking, a couple of things came to my head, which is really who sits on these panels that makes these decisions. You know, we have all these things that are set up and they're almost secretive. And we need to find out who's sitting on these panels that make these decisions. I can guarantee you it's got a money element to it. And we always say, follow the money, because that's where you will find out the true picture of what's going on around all the exclusionary practices that happened within the education system. There's always a money element to it. Now, why are all these students being referred to places like Prevent? It's simple. Nothing revolutionary has happened without students. It's students that have led the way. Students and young people have led the way. If you go back to the South African apartheid regime and what was going on at that time, and who was challenging it? Students. Students nationally, internationally were challenging that. And it was them that led the way. What's different this time is that we need to have parents supporting young people to do the work that they're doing. And at the moment, there's a great fear from parents. Parents are being made to be fearful of what will happen to their children. So we have two dynamics going on. We're making the children fearful so they can't speak out about Palestine. They can't use their voice to challenge what they see is a serious injustice. They're being silenced. And it's up to the parents to get behind them and support them and say, you know what, you will not silence my children. You will not silence my neighbor's children. But in order to do that, you need to have the information and the knowledge. And it's important that parents and the communities know their rights, but also how the law implements these rights. That's really important. That's really key. If you don't know your rights, or you don't know your rights as they are connected to the law. So, for example, the behavior policy that is used by the school to exclude children, if you don't know that, you can't challenge it. So you need to actually know what is going on. You need to actually know the policies. We're living in a country at the moment that is led by old men mostly. And that is the truth for a lot of our countries. They're often led by old men, fraudulent old men. And it is the youth that brings about change. Now is the time for us to get behind those youth and say, we will support you. I know everyone's been talking quotes today. My only quote that I have a tendency to use quite often is because it puts me in a position where I'm always challenging the system. And it's a quote by Akala, of all people, who says, if you haven't found something to die for, you haven't lived. So what are we willing to die for? And I would say that that would be our children. And this is the point in time in the UK where we need the collective action of parents, carers, community, grandparents, the entire family to get behind our young people. Now, when we go into school and we challenge an exclusion, we use the guidance. That's a legal document. It's only guidance. They don't have to adhere to it. But that's what we use to challenge the exclusion. And just like what is going to happen with this new guidance that the government is about to put out, but we know the schools will use it, they will adhere to it. So they will be the ones that define, using that guidance, who's a terrorist, what radical is. And I can tell you all the people in this space would be considered on that list. All the organizations in this space would then be on that list. And they're actually planning to name organizations They're at the moment debating the legalities of naming people and organizations. So don't be surprised if you see your organization on that list. But then you're in good company, right? The ANC was considered radical, right? So you're in good company. And it means that you're fighting, you're on the side of right, you're on the side of justice. During the apartheid regime, young people did such things as, and I remember because I was a bit younger then, a little bit, not much. And young people encouraged me to take responsibility for my actions. They encouraged me to say what it was that I wanted to change and how I could change it. So here's the thing. They went around supermarkets and they picked up everything that had South Africa on it. And they would put them in trolleys with a big old label that said, these products support apartheid, don't buy them. It might seem really minor at the time, but did it frustrate the heck out of the big supermarkets? And they did that collectively, consistently. So you need collective action. And this is what I think this evening is all about, the collective action. So yes, we can sit on Zoom and we can decide what it is that we want to do. But here's the thing. At the moment, the government is focusing on you because you're being considered a radical and an extremist. And they will always find ways, and your young people will be considered radical and extremist, hence why they will get referred to Prevent. They will always find ways in which to label you so that they can put you in some kind of category. They will find ways of infiltrating. They will find ways of stopping you. So, for example, if you're considered an extremist, would you be able to hire a hall to have an event? Should that stop you? No. How did we get to this point? We got to this point because we organized in each other's front rooms. We organized in spaces like Bogler Overture and Grassroots Bookstore. That's where the organization happened, in those community spaces. So now's the time to get really radical. Get on a coach, hire a coach, get on a train, get on the bus, and go to those spaces where things are happening, where people are organizing. You need to step out of your comfort zone. This isn't the time for you to sit back and say someone else will do it. And by being in this space says you're not willing to sit back and let someone else do it. You are willing to take the collective direct action. Now, outside of school, young people are always told that what they do outside of school can bring the school into disrepute. We need some community between the youngsters and the elders. That's where it's at. We really need for people to get on board, get engaged with the elders in the community. Make sure that they also have the information so that they can support young people. Don't be afraid to challenge a school that is doing something that actually is racially discriminatory. You know it's wrong. Do you want to sit and continue for the next 10, 20 years and continue to let that be the case for your grandchildren to be doing the same thing? I don't think that that's what we should be doing. But that's a personal opinion. Parents often say to us that they tell their children to keep their head down when they're facing an injustice. But we have a new generation of young people who won't keep their head down. So what do? Do you continue to tell them to keep their head down, or do you support them to lift their head up and for their voices to be heard? This is the spaces that you need in order for that to happen. And you can do those anywhere, all over the place. I will never tell you that you don't look out for your child first, because that's the first thing you need to do, is to look out for your child, your individual child. You cannot protect someone else's child if you're not protecting your own. So conversations of what your child is doing, what's happening for that child. Because if your child cannot talk about Palestine in school, they have to be able to talk about Palestine at home. They have to be able to talk about Palestine in those community spaces. And then you have to decide as a parent, what do I want to do? Do I want to do this on my own? Nothing has ever worked doing it on your own. I think we've heard that repeatedly this evening, that collective action is very, 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 very vital. I can't stress that enough. Communities together are more powerful than government on their own. And remember that as much as we don't like it, and there's nothing there, they only exist because we vote for them. They're only in power because we vote for them. So who do we want if we don't want them? Or how do we hold their feet to the coals? We have to seriously start thinking about the things that we would like to see, the rights and the justice that we want to see for our children, all children. Now, I know we can compare Palestine to the Ukraine in terms of what schools are actually doing. But in terms of what's actually happening for the young people in Palestine, I think our children are quite clear that there's a total difference. There's a huge difference. And you can't tell a child, how do you tell a child that is from Palestine that they shouldn't talk about their homeland, their family, that they shouldn't grieve for people that they may have left there? How do you tell them that? If you're taking your child to a school that is saying that, then maybe you need to consider, is this the right place for my child? And also to remember that that school exists because collectively we decide to take our children there. And collectively we can decide to not take our children there. So you can say it with your feet and walk. The other thing you can do is to find out what the parents, what the teachers are doing. There are some amazing teachers in our schools, and they are struggling also with a lot of this. Who are they? And you don't have to find them so that you can out them, but you can find them so you can support them. Yeah.
Thank you.
Sorry.
No, sorry, I was just saying thank you.
Okay. Apart from that, I don't know what else I can add, because I feel like it's been, you've had some amazing presentations today who've actually brought to the fore what collective action should look like. And I only,
Jay, you always,
sorry?
I was just bringing your praise. Your presentation was fire.
Well, I want people to look out for their children, but also look out for your neighbor's children as well. And if that means that you have to come out of your comfort zone, then that's what has to happen. We cannot let this is just one genocide in one part of the world, but the world is watching. And we are unique in the situation in that we're in the space that sanctioned what is going on in Palestine. We sanctioned that, our government sanctioned it. So we get to say if we want to have those people remain in power. They can't sanction a genocide and then alleviate their guilt with a food drop. To where? To who? You can't sanction that and then don't call for a ceasefire. You can't. It's inhumane. And if we sit back and we stay silent about it, It means that we are complicit in it. There's another quote, and I'm not quite sure how it goes, but you probably all know it, that it's about, when they came for me, I said nothing. When they came for you, I said nothing. By the time they got to me, there was no one left to help me. We are actually all our brother and sisters keepers. It doesn't matter where we live on this planet, that's who we are. And as parents, our children are our most precious commodity. Me personally, my children are old, but at the same time, they are in their 40s, but I'm telling you, I would die for them. They are the thing that will actually die for. And if your child is there and needs help, I will die for them too. We're all in it together. Forget what they said, but we know we're all in it together. And when our children are not allowed to be themselves in school, in an education space that we are paying for them to be abused. Stop spending your money for your child to be abused, for anyone's child to be abused. This is what we're paying for. And our children and young people have had a horrendous last couple of years. And now we're telling them that they must remain silent in the face of this inhumanity. We can't.
Oh, Jay, thank you so much. I just knew you was going to bring the smoke and the fire and the wisdom, and it's important. And when you say our children, we mean it. It's our neighbors. It's the children in Gaza, in Palestine. It's the martyrs are our family. The political prisoners are our family. And that's important to mention. We're not gonna follow the individualist idea of living in this world. We're collective. So thank you so much. I'll pass it to Emmanuel Emmanuel, do you want to pass on to the last speaker? The most amazing speaker.
Yeah, and I just want to say thank you, Jay. Like, it's so important what you're speaking about. Like, in terms of the collective, I always say it. The magic is in our hands. The magic is in our hands. We're the ones that can do it. It's not by voting by no ballot box or by liking on stuff on social media. It's us with our hands, with our heart, with our spirits, with our minds, with our feet. We're the ones that have got to do it. We're the ones that have got to liberate ourselves, be it from whatever it is. We're the ones that have got to liberate ourselves. So our last speaker, from the Palestinian youth movement, who's doing so much work, so much incredible work all over in terms of helping Palestine, in terms of fighting against injustice, fighting against oppression. So we've got Jana from PYM, Palestinian Youth Movement, to speak. So the floor is yours.
Hi, thank you so much. It's been so beautiful listening to all you speakers and all your contributions, and my mind is so big right now, and so is my heart. So good evening, everyone. I'm here on behalf of the Palestinian Youth Movement. We are a grassroots, transnational, independent base-building organization of Palestinian and Arab youth living in exile due to the ongoing Zionist colonization of our homeland. So as I said, it's been so enlightening hearing about what everyone has to say about education and how to harness a sense of urgency and accountability for one's education, especially in the midst of an ongoing genocide. Schools can be one of the most enlightening as well as one of the most stagnating and hostile environments for young people. This thin line is often decided by the teachers themselves, those who see their duties to their students and their students' interests, and those who see their duties to the state and state interests. The British education system is so intrinsically linked to the UK state agenda and how its population views and understands its history and Britain's involvement or lack thereof in foreign politics, especially when it comes to its vital role to the occupation of Palestine, to the occupation of Palestine, especially in terms of the Balfour Declaration. Also, in this country, education cannot be separated from the Met Police as it leads the prevent policy, which we've heard so much about tonight. And yeah, so as working as an educator and as a teaching assistant for the past year, you just realize how messed up it is, because you cannot start teaching unless you do your prevent training, and the prevent training, you have to do it every year. You have to just redo it, and it's just insane, because it's always like the most basic, like soft left-leaning politics is like, oh my goodness, the Met Police has just blacklisted this, and like the Met Police says this, and the Met, like all of it, the whole training is just like led by the Met Police. And there will be simple things such as if a student presents that opposition to police or opposition to the government in whatever subtle way, that's cause for concern and should be noted down. And it's just like, it's just fascist. And this is kind of like, I'm going off on a bit of a tangent, but as I work with early years, and so that also includes nursery. And there was this little boy who comes from a Muslim background, and one day was saying things that included like Allah, like he was very visibly upset, and he was saying things like, oh, Allah's gonna be upset with you, Allah's gonna punish you, to one of the little boys. And so one of the other teachers actually started noting down and writing down like what this child was saying. And some of the stuff was jarring, but it's also like, this child's actually 4 years old and doesn't know what they're saying, and is probably just like being told off by his parents, being like, oh, Allah will be upset with you if you do this, or which is okay, maybe not the best way to teach religion, but it's like, you do not by any means get to abuse your power and ruin this child's life and have them be so much more racialized than they will already be in their life. And so what happened was this teacher actually noted down everything and inputted it into the system as a cause for concern, like within just 10 minutes, like didn't even have a conversation about it with any of us other staff. We're just like, this is worrying, this is unacceptable, and reported the child to the school. And the child came in once again after that, and into school, and now we were told today that the child is moving schools and probably moving country. And I'm not sure, the school hasn't told me if this is linked to like the child being reported, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was. And it's just so insane when you think that this child is 4 years old and already being like subjected to so much state violence. But yeah, that was kind of a tangent, but yeah, it just speaks volumes to schools and like who exactly do they aim to protect, and how exactly like the hierarchies of power function. Because also I'm one of the few Muslim staff in the school, and I'm also the only Arab. And an important like factor in my employability is that I work through an education agency. So I don't have a contract with the school. So my job is actually quite precarious. So when I first started working with the school, like a few weeks in, it was like a week after October 7, and what I find so like darkly sick and funny about schools is that they will use the excuse of avoiding something that's too political or political in any way as an excuse to just absolve themselves of taking any accountability or taking a stance. However, with early years, even with year one, they, as part of their like education, they do news round every day, which is like a BBC quick news round of like world politics, and that seems political to me. I don't know. And they'll show them segments about like, oh, Hamas led war against Israel, which is like obviously not unbiased whatsoever. And after watching that news round, one of the year one children had actually asked the class teacher to draw her an Israeli flag. And the teacher did it. And it just really speaks volumes to what like staff and these systems of power, especially like educational institutions, how like where exactly they'll draw the line, and what they'll permit themselves to tell students versus what they won't allow, what knowledge they feel like they should withhold versus what they feel like they should educate them on. So it's been very, very difficult trying to navigate Palestine in schools from a teaching point of view, because I'm not supported by staff in any way. I've consistently tried to gauge my coworkers' reactions and stances on Palestine, and like I'll bring it up as in, oh, they'll ask me what I did for my weekend, and I'm like, oh, I went to the march, I went to the Palestine march. Oh, have you heard about what's happening? Oh, and they'll just be like, oh, war is so terrible, and that's it. Like, or sometimes they'll just completely just blank anything that I have to say about it. And it's just, and I also try to have a conversation with the class teacher who I work with for year one, and she like has made it very clear that she's Jewish and she's practicing Jewish. And so one day I tried to open up the conversation with her where I was just like, I'm actually feeling like I'm feeling really terrible about like what's happening. And she, like, we had a conversation about it, and she was nice enough about it to now I think that she has stopped playing news round, at least when I'm in the class. She doesn't play news round for the children anymore. But that's about as much progress that I've been able to make within the school, and it's been really, really infuriating and quite isolating. So I'm also very grateful for this event to know that there's so many of us in this position, and like quite energizing as well to know that like the drive is there. And even though there's so much suppression and hostility towards Palestine, and just justice, sentiments towards justice in general, that there is a space that we can now connect with each other, and hopefully work towards mobilizing and educating the youth, which is something I've been thinking about a lot, especially in terms of early years and like primary early years education. Like how do you teach liberation to such a young age when they're still trying to grapple with the world and learn about themselves. And so even though I don't have the answer, I think it's just nice to have a space where you can think about it without judgment, and with people being on the same page about it. But in terms of PYM, we have done some work to try and engage the student front, such as walkouts, trying to work with schools and support them with walkouts, as well as Palestine 101s, trying to really reclaim the narrative of Palestine and its occupation and its violent ongoing genocide. There's also been different workshops such as busting Zionist myths, which is, at the end of the day, like, knowledge really is power. You can never know enough. And also Zionists love to be annoying and debate and argue. And it's just so good to be able to bust so many common Zionist myths on the spot and see them crumble. And there's also security and media trainings, which we've been doing. So yeah, so we're trying to create more avenues and just energize people and not allow people to fall into the trap of feeling hopeless and that there's nothing to do and that this is just the way that things are, and we'll just rot looking at our screens and just wallowing in the social media abyss of hell. Sorry, going too hard. But yeah, so if you'd like to follow up with what we're doing, and even make any suggestions or contributions to what you think liberation education looks like, you can check us out on Instagram at PYM Britain for the Britain chapter, and we'll happily get in touch. And yeah, thank you so much for holding the space. I feel like a lot of the points were already touched on, and yeah, I feel a lot better about being in teaching. Yeah, because it's been a lot. But yeah, thank you so much, and take care.
Thank you. I knew, just even speaking to you beforehand and witnessing the work that Palestinian youth movement has done in this country internationally has been amazing. Like your political education work, stuff around even protests, like what you said, debunking, the propaganda, all of these elements has been phenomenal in the movement and joining the coalition. So I also want to thank you for your wisdom and knowledge. And also it gets tiring to be in these institutions that are so rooted in violence and harm. So being in a space where you get to hear other teachers, educators, students, young, old, I don't know where I'm at this point. I'm in my mid-20s, but it's important to come together as a collective. So I also want to thank you. I also want to thank every single speaker who came, every single organizer who came into the space. It's 10 o'clock and I'm like, God damn, but still the numbers are still good. So we all have the energy and the fire to be actually we need a liberated world as a necessity. We need to organize, we need to build a political consciousness. We got to meet our material conditions too. We have this knowledge right now. We've spoken. What are we actually going to do now, right? After this call, definitely sleep. But tomorrow is a new day. What are we going to do? How are you going to distribute this knowledge to your neighbors? I talk to random people on the train sometimes, and we have interesting conversations. So it's our duty not only to seek knowledge, but also distribute knowledge. It's an important one. And And as we said, like, we're organizing for a liberated Palestine by any means necessary, in our webinars, on the streets, and we'll continue. The imperialist states will continue to find ways to repress our organizing, but liberation has never been given to us by the oppressors. It was always been given by the people. So we're going to keep organizing, and no one's left behind, which is the most important part. So again, I want to thank every single person who came into the space, who stayed, who left, whoever sees it. We were meant to have a Q&A, but a lot of the questions were answered already. You can contact No More Exclusions, which is and with any questions, queries. You can also hopefully join other groups, movements, join your local mutual aid group. But I opened it up with a poem, and I want to end it. So it's like an opening and a closing before we leave, which goes, I'm going to go back to the poem. So hopefully it all aligned, which goes, no more exclusion means no more occupation, no more dispossessing, no more colonizing, no more bombing, no more apartheid, no more false equivalence, no more imperialism because of imperialism. No more exclusion means no more injustice, no more unheard voices, no more unfulfilled dreams, no more trauma, no more accountability, no more broken relationships. No more exclusion means no more expulsions. A liberated world will happen by force by fire, hopefully in our lifetime. So it's going to happen. I believe it, and that's the hope that we have with each other. I'm going to pass it on to Emmanuel. If you have any last thoughts, last closing.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you to everyone that spoke. Thank you especially to the BSL interpreters. Your work is so important, it's so vital, because at the end of the day, disability justice is at the basis of liberation anyways, because there's, even without getting into it, but disabled people or people that they call disabled in this world, listen, it's people that have been exploited and dispossessed by the state, but it doesn't matter. But I just want to say thank you to everyone. And I want to say, like, over anger, over despair, over rage that you may hold in your stomach, that you may hold in your chest, that you may hold in your throat, that you may hold when you clench your teeth, just looking at it on social media or hearing it in the street or hearing it on the news, like, hold on to that. Hold on to that, because that's what we're going to use. Because as much as we need, and especially you'll hear one love and all of this, but we need the rage. We need the anger. That's what we need to fuel a new world, because in that rage, in that anger is love. All the anger that we have in regards to these things, it's love. It's love for people, it's love for the world. So hold on to that rage, hold on to the anger, and most importantly, hold on to the hope, hold on to the love. Because that's what we're going to use. Like, it starts off like Jay was saying in the answers, that it starts off with meeting with people in your community, in a cafe, in your house, wherever it is. We can do it, and we will do it, and we will have liberation in our lifetime, inshallah. So that's what I want to say. Thank you for everyone.
Thank you everyone so much. Thank you.